If we could freeze the universe at any moment in time, what would we see? What would we see if we were scientists standing outside of this frozen universe, studying it with a high-powered microscope? Intuitively, it seems like we would see a snapshot of atoms scattered against a backdrop of empty space in some vast distribution or pattern. An arrangement of point particles, frozen on their cosmic journey from some past location to some future location. The 19th century mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace had something like this in mind when he created a thought experiment that has come to be known as Laplace's demon. The demon is like the scientist, standing outside of the frozen world mosaic, counting the individual atoms and calculating their trajectories. Unlike an actual scientist, the demon doesn't need a microscope or institutional funding. The demon is omniscient. It simply knows the position and momentum of every particle in the universe at any moment. Given these two variables, position and momentum, the demon can calculate with mathematical certainty where every particle is coming from and where it is headed. Freeze the universe at any moment, and from that specific pattern of atoms, the demon can calculate both the past and the future with perfect precision. The demon is the embodiment of determinism. In a universe that is perfectly rational, the calculation of all possible events is just an engineering problem. We can make perfect predictions because the world is perfectly predictable. Looking backward in time, the demon sees something like a cone of possible worlds. At the beginning of the universe, all possibilities are open. Then, one by one, each possibility becomes an actuality. Each way the world might have been collapses into the way the world actually turns out. From the demon's perspective in its view from nowhere, the arrow of time shows up as the systematic and inevitable devouring of possible worlds towards a final determinate outcome. Some final end where all decisions that can be made have been made, where every position that any atom could occupy has been occupied, and there's no more space for anything else to happen. The cone of possibility narrows with existential finality from the Big Bang to the end of the universe. But we don't have to be omniscient demons to see this. It's happening around us all the time and everywhere. Having the resources to attain a college degree opens up a larger selection of alternative possibilities, of ways the world might turn out to be. For a person without the resources or motivations to proceed beyond high school, the space of alternative possibilities shrinks. This is, in a sense, what we mean by power, the ability to affect change in the world. The ways we can engage with the world are shaped by factors ranging from genetics to culture to economics. To be powerful just is to have access to ways of engaging with the world that others do not. But as Uma Narayan points out, there is a trade-off. Power affords greater possibilities for action, but restricts the ability to take on the perspectives of others. The shape of the possibility space changes depending upon socioeconomic positioning, enlarging in some areas while shrinking in others. And it isn't just the availability of socioeconomic alternatives that narrows or expands. Stress creates cognitive loads that constantly reshape the neural pathways in our brains. Energy that, in one scattering of the mosaic, would be directed towards long-term planning is instead redirected towards immediate survival. The rent is due, the medical bills are in the mail, and the assignments are late. Neurotransmitter availability shrinks. The crisis response patterns wear into neuroanatomical grooves that are inherited from one generation to the next. Socioeconomic stress changes brains. And as Patricia Churchland points out, brains are causal machines that shape by degrees our abilities to exert self-control. In laboratory experiments, Benjamin Libet has demonstrated that our internal sense of making a choice actually follows after the body has begun acting. The cascade of embodied neuromuscular activations that initiate our actions have already begun before we ever become aware that we have made a choice. Genetics, environment, injury, and access to healthcare and education all make a difference in the ability of the brain to process, recognize, and execute alternative possible strategies in alternative possible scenarios. All of these external factors, socioeconomics, genetics, brain anatomy, encroach upon the space of the Cartesian theater. Did your choice to enroll in college follow from your character, from your own values, from your internal motivations? If so, then the causal sequence that leads to you being in college ultimately originates in you. You are the ultimate author of your own actions. Every choice that follows from your internal motivations opens some alternatives while foreclosing others. In this compatibilist scenario, you are Laplace's demon, murdering and creating alternative futures with your every action. But if your internal character is formed by your genetics and your environment, then have you really escaped determinism? Each internal state was caused by a prior internal state, which was caused by another internal state, and so on. Eventually, we come up against the paradox of a self-causing internal state, an inner motivation that, like Baron Munchausen, pulls itself up by its own hair. And we don't want our mental states to be completely unconnected from the brain and body that produce them. Otherwise, what would it even mean to say that this brain is having this experience? We want to say that our mental states belong to us in some genuine and robust sense, that they don't swing completely free from our brain states. This would make neuroscience difficult. There needs to be some reliability in nature if we are going to make successful scientific predictions about the future. All of our achievements in science and technology would be incomprehensible if physical events like walking down a street did not reliably follow from physical causes. For this reason, we posit a fundamental scientific principle known as the causal closure of the physical, which states that for every physical event, a sufficient physical cause exists. Jae-Gwon Kim has argued that if we accept this simple principle, then it becomes impossible for any mental event to ever be the cause for a physical event. Kim calls this the causal exclusion argument, and it runs like this. I experience a felt sense of intending to walk down one street rather than another. This mental state of intending depends upon the underlying physical state of my brain. Once I begin walking, science is able to tell a complete and sufficient story of physical causation that begins with my biological brain state, which triggers specific neurons to fire, which causes specific muscles to contract, which results in the initial step being taken onto this street rather than that street. There isn't any work left over for the mental intention to do. According to Kim, the qualitative mental state, the felt sense of intending, represents an epiphenomenal byproduct. The feeling of intending to perform the action comes free with the physical actions, but like the steam whistle in the locomotive, it doesn't do any actual work. All the action happens at the level of physical brains and muscles. We're essentially like children who've been handed a video game controller that isn't plugged in. We press the buttons and imagine that we're in control of what's happening on the screen. But this is an illusion. We were never actually playing the game at all. Neil Levy suggests one way out of this bind in his counterexample to Frankfurt-style cases. Frankfurt's argument against the moral relevance of alternative possibilities hinges on the assumption of a clean distinction between the internal world of motivations and the external context of the outside world. But this distinction doesn't hold up, even on Frankfurt's own terms. Your capacity to perform one action rather than another is just as context-dependent as the availability of alternative possibilities. There doesn't seem to be a clear, bright line where your internal capacities end and what the external environment affords begins. If there is an original inner author of our choices, then their abilities to make choices will change and shift under different conditions and in different contexts. The external world presses upon the walls of the Cartesian theater, granting you capacities for some actions while restricting your capacities for others. And where should you locate agency in cases like Flint, Michigan, where lead in the water pipes caused changes in the neuroanatomical development of local children? As Jane Bennett points out, the inner life of the children of Flint was shaped by developments in their prefrontal cortex, which were in turn influenced by the presence of lead in the local drinking water, which was itself the result of cost-cutting decisions made by local politicians. The space of alternative possibilities available to the children of Flint seems to have been shaped by a wide assemblage of social and material practices, implicating everything from the properties of lead to the budget decisions of lawmakers. No individual component can be singled out as the ultimate originating cause. Moral responsibility falls upon a widely distributed system. Contemporary discussions of agency increasingly recognize the distributed, externalized, world-involving nature of our choices. In the next lecture, William James will argue the case for an indeterminate universe that is open to alternative possible outcomes. And I'll see you there.